Okay, our topics are waste disposal and water waste treatment. So first we're going to talk about wastewater treatment. How can we reduce water pollution from point sources? And point sources are just a single identifiable source of pollution. The first way is septic tanks. These are underground. They are a major tool for wastewater disposal in rural and suburban areas, so that's what we would use here in Coppell. Basically, the bacteria decomposes the waste, and then a sludge settles down at the bottom of the tank, and then the rest flows out through underwater ground pipes. Here is just a picture. So you go in here, the sludge settles down at the bottom, and then it goes out. Most cities do not separate or have separate pipes for carrying runoff away, and that's just because it is expensive. So that means that most sewage is all mixed together. To install dual systems, add capacity, and repair the nation's $2 trillion aging sewer system, it would cost $10 billion a year for a decade. So this is why most cities have not made the change. So what do environmentalists want from Congress? We've heard of the Clean Water Act, and basically they just want to make sure that the EPA monitors the sewer leaks and overflows and then reports them to the public health authorities. There are 3 steps in sewage treatment. The first is primary, and this is a mechanical process. Basically, large solids are filtered, and then the smaller solids remaining are settled down into the sludge. The second sewage treatment is a biological process, and bacteria decomposes about 90% of the wastewater. The third sewage treatment is advanced, and it is expensive, so it's only used to treat about 5% of the wastewater in the U.S., and it uses chemicals to further remove pollutants left in the water. Now, before the wastewater is actually discharged to surface waters, it has to undergo a few other processes, such as bleaching, which is removing water coloration, disinfection, which is just killing the bacteria, chlorination, which can be a harmful process and even cause damage to the human nervous, immune, and endocrine systems, and other disinfectants in place of chlorination are using ozone and ultraviolet light, but they are more expensive and their effects don't last as long. Here's an example of the 3 steps of the sewage treatment. So your raw sewage comes in, this is the primary, the sludge settles, and then it goes all the way down here, and that sludge is either disposed of in a landfill or ocean or applied to cropland as fertilizer. And if it goes to the secondary, the bacteria is killed away and then it can go out to the surface. So what should we do with sewage sludge? First of all, what exactly is sludge? It's just what is the waste pretty much created by the sewage treatment, and it can contain toxic chemicals, so that's why it is a problem. 9% of sludge is put into circular digesters, and basically bacteria just decomposes it further, and then it can be used as a soil conditioner. Here's a picture of the circular digester. 36% of the sludge are biosolids, and they can be used as fertilizer. And most of the sludge is dumped, either in landfills where it can contaminate groundwater, or incinerated or burned, which can cause pollutants, and it also produces a toxic ash, and when that is buried, the landfill can also leak. So we said it can be used to fertilize, and what are the problems? It's expensive, and that can cause health problems. So how can we improve our sewage treatment? There are several ways. Basically, just giving accountability to industries and businesses. We don't want them using the toxic wastes. And another way for households is they can use waterless composting toilet systems, which are cheaper and they are maintained by professionals. We can also use nature to treat our sewage, and that is by using natural or even artificial wetlands. It doesn't involve much technology and it is inexpensive. So, how it works. First, the sewage goes into sedimentation tanks. The solids are shuttled out as sludge, and then they're removed and processed to be used as fertilizer. Then the liquid is pumped into oxidation ponds, where bacteria can break down the remaining wastes. And after about a month, the water is released into the artificial marshes, where plants and bacteria carry out further filtration and cleansing, and it flows into the water source. Another way is an artificial wetland, also known as a waste garden, and it is used in hotels and restaurants, and the water can be used to irrigate or flush toilets. Here's a picture of a waste garden. So first, the raw sewage comes into a bed of limestone gravel, which breaks down the sewage into chemicals that can be absorbed by the plant roots. And the gravel also absorbs phosphorus. Then it goes through the process a second time, and it can now be recycled for irrigation and flushing toilets. Another way is through genetic engineering. Some insects have their guts are resistant to pesticides, and that gene has been transferred into culturing bacteria. So what they do, or actually, this is actually a theory of what they want to do. You just pass the contaminated water through a large vessel called a bioreactor, and it contains that bacteria. So why should we strengthen and how should we strengthen the Clean Air Act? There are several ways. We want increased funding and authority control for non-point sources of pollution and for integrated watershed and airshed planning. We want to upgrade computer systems for monitoring compliance with the law and strengthen programs to prevent and control toxic water pollution. We also want to expand rights of citizens to bring lawsuits, higher standards for wetland restoration, and creating new wetlands before filling any natural ones, so we're not wasting land. Okay, now on to wastewater disposal. First of all, what is solid waste? It is basically just any unwanted or discharged material that is not a liquid or a gas. And the reason that we don't want, or why it's not natural to have solid waste, is that nature doesn't have it. One organism's waste become the nutrients for others, so you don't have any waste sitting around. When we have waste, that means that we are wasting our Earth's resources, and it's also responsible for huge amounts of air and water pollution, soil erosion, and degradation. When we think of solid waste, we normally think of just our garbage or trash, which is known as municipal solid waste, but that really only comprises 1.5% of our nation's solid waste. 1% is sewage sludge, 13% is agriculture, and most of it, 75%, is mining and oil and gas production. So that 1.5% seems small. Just to show how much waste we have, each year the U.S. generates enough municipal waste to fill a bumper-to-bumper convoy of garbage trucks encircling the globe 8 times. We produce a lot of solid waste. Okay, so how do we deal with this waste? The first thing we would want to do is prevent it, and obviously not use techniques or participate in activities that would create this waste. So that would involve things like changing industrial processes to eliminate use of harmful chemicals, purchasing different products, and so on. The second way of preventing waste, if you've is not letting those substances turn into waste by using the 3 R's: reuse, repair, recycle. And then lastly, the last priority, the least effective way, it's beyond prevention. You have to move on to management. You've already produced the waste, so what do we do with it? And that would be treating waste to reduce toxicity, incinerating the waste, burying it, so on. So why should we reduce instead of manage? It saves matter and energy resources, it reduces pollution, protects biodiversity, and saves money. There currently, right now, is an eco-industrial revolution, which basically involves biomimicry, which is mimicking the way nature works. And we said that nature doesn't have any solid waste, so this is basically using the wastes of one manufacturer and letting that become the raw materials for another. Here is just a web showing how people's wastes are becoming heat and resources of others, and it's all interconnected, and there is no waste. There's also economic benefits. You have reduced costs of controlling pollutions and following regulations. If you're not using those materials, then you don't have the regulations, and that reduces your costs. It improves the health and safety of workers. They're not working with toxic chemicals. And there's also an incentive to create environmentally beneficial chemicals. So one way to manage wastes is to burn it, also called incinerating. There are 3 types of incinerators. The first is waste-to-energy incinerators, and they boil water to make steam for heating water or space or for producing electricity. The second is mass burn incinerators, which is where mixed trash is dumped into a huge furnace. And lastly, refuse-derived incinerators, where burnable waste is separated from unburnable and recyclable materials. Here are the trade-offs of incineration. Obviously, it reduces our trash volume, and we need less landfills, but it's expensive. You have toxic ash. The burning leads to air pollution, so you can weigh it. Another way is burying it or putting it in landfills. There are 2 types of landfills: open dumps, which are basically just fields or holes where garbage is deposited and sometimes covered with soil. And then you have sanitary landfills. The waste is spread out in thin layers, it's compacted and covered daily with a fresh layer of clay or plastic foam. There are also trade-offs. There's little odor, little groundwater pollution, but then you have air pollution, and it releases greenhouse gases. Leaking is the big problem with landfills. Leachate is rainwater contaminated as it percolates through the solid waste, and there are ways to prevent it. The landfills are lined, and there are also wells to monitor the leaking. New landfills, so very few, have vent pipes to collect gas and see the toxicity levels. And then once the landfill is full, it is covered with clay, sand, and gravel and topsoil so that nothing can seep through. And this is just hazardous waste, how to get rid of it. Basically, you want to convert the hazardous waste into non-hazardous substances, and then you just pick your method of storage, and it's really going to be here forever. Landfill, waste piles. So that's all.